This podcast is intended for educational and entertainment purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional, medical, or any other type of advice. Have you found yourself asking, how did I get here in my life? And what happened to the magic and the life that I dreamed of? I have been there, and I was determined to figure out how I got there. I'm Cynthia Fontaine, and I searched in many areas of personal development, consciousness, personality profiles, healing, and more to find the secrets to getting my magic back and living my life on purpose, boldly and authentic. And now I am going to share those secrets with you. Welcome to Boldly Authentic, the podcast. Hey, welcome. I am so glad that you are here. Here we are, episode 10. I can't believe this has gone by so fast. And this is episode 10 with you. And in this episode, we are going to wrap up this mini series that I've been doing about energy. So in episode 9, I talked about different types of energy healing modalities. And in episode 8, I talked about your energy field, how to protect it, how to fill it, things like that. If you've missed those, you're going to want to go back and check those out. And today I'm talking about energy again, and this is going to wrap up this energy mini series. Energy regarding our families and our lineage and our heritage, because so often we are unaware of the energetic baggage, I'm going to say, that we carry from our families. And that can be family of origin. It can be family of upbringing. These are things that sometimes are built in our DNA and sometimes are ancestral patterns that are learned. These things can affect us in a way that we often aren't even aware. Oftentimes in my work, I will find people that have vows. And some practitioners refer to vows as heart walls or blocks. A vow is like putting a brick in the wall, right? You're building this brick wall and you make these vows to always be or never be. So I'm always going to be like my grandmother because she was so sweet. I'm never going to be like my dad because he was an alcoholic. So that is a vow. And when we make vows in our lives and we set up these heart walls, it cuts off part of our energy. And most of us aren't even aware that such a thing exists until you get into some type of personal development work. You could do something like shadow work. Dr. Michael Lennox does shadow work courses a couple of times a year, and he goes really deep. I love Dr. Michael Lennox's work. He is an astrologer. He's also a psychotherapist. You can do Byron Katie. You could go to healer school. You can do tapping. There's all sorts of ways that you can release those blocks or those vows. Now, oftentimes, however, we don't realize that they're there. So how do you work on something that you're not even aware is there to start with? Well, that can be a little bit tricky. And that is where working with a practitioner or getting in some kind of program is key for sure. Now, in every family, whether, again, it's your family of origin or your family of upbringing, there are patterns that repeat. And sometimes those patterns repeat for generation after generation after generation and will continue to repeat until somebody breaks the cycle. One pattern within my own family on both sides is alcoholism and also substance abuse. So having it on both sides, it's like a double whammy, right? I feel super blessed to have gotten to this point in my life without having that type of addiction problem. So in your family, you may not have that particular family pattern, but you'll have some other pattern within your family when you look and you dig to see who else has this pattern within the family. One pattern that I didn't realize I had in my family on my dad's side was this life purpose as a healer and as a seer. I had no idea until I was probably in my 40s, maybe. Could have been late 30s, but I think it was more like 40s when I had this conversation with my dear Uncle Joe about having the gift and doing what I do, because I didn't tell my family what I did for a long time on my dad's side. My mom's side, everybody knew that I was a psychic. I do talk about it a little bit in my book, Psychic, A Guide to Your Intuition. If you haven't read that, go get that on Amazon. It's super cheap and it is short, and it's got some great tools in there for you to learn how to start building up your intuition and your psychic muscle, because it really is a muscle. So even though I have the mark and I knew that I was born as a psychic, it took years to develop it to the point of excellence. Just like somebody who studies engineering or electronics, it takes time to really become good at your art, your craft. And it's no different with psychic intuition or psychic development or mediumship. It takes practice. They say that it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert in something. And I certainly have put in more than 10,000 hours, that's for sure. So back to patterns in our families that repeat very often for generations upon generations. So on my dad's side of the family, my uncle has this gift, but he wasn't actually aware of it until he was probably in his 70s. And he says to me one day, I think I have what you have. And then he told me this story about a fishing vessel, which I think I've shared with you before in previous episodes. I'll give it just a quick recap, where he talked about that he looked at this fishing vessel for a friend of his and told the friend to buy engine insurance. Yes, I have told that story. He didn't know why he told the friend to buy engine insurance. He just thought that he needed to buy engine insurance. And 3 weeks later, the engine in that fishing vessel blew up. And the guy would have been bankrupt. It would have ruined his whole financials and put his family in a terrible position. And then he went on to share with me that my great-grandmother delivered half of the babies in Newport, the city that we were from. And everybody would come to her when they had physical problems. Because there, weren't a lot of doctors back then. There was a doctor in town, but they would go to my great-grandmother for medical things, for poultices and all sorts of things. So she was a healer. She did healing work, and she also did a little predictive work as well. Now, I did not know that until I was in my 40s, so that was pretty interesting to find that out about on my dad's side. Now, my mom's side, I knew that has gone on for generations, where people, particularly the women in the family, have read cards and they've cleared houses and they've done those sorts of things. So it's probably one of the lesser common things in families, most families anyway. But if you're listening, you may have that in your family line somewhere along the way, or it may be there and you might just not have been aware of it, just like I wasn't aware of it on my dad's side. If you have relatives, elders that you can ask about things, I really recommend that you sit down and you talk to them and ask them as many questions that you can think of about your family and patterns in your family. Because if you don't sit down today, tomorrow might be too late. So get on it, plan it, talk to the elders in your family, and get some research done for your own peace of mind. And then there may be something that you have had going on in your life that you didn't understand, that your Uncle Joe or Aunt Mabel says, oh yeah, your great-grandmother or great-grandfather had that or did this or whatever. So it can be really helpful. Once the information is lost, it's lost. So do it before it's too late if you can, if you have elders that know about the family history and different things in the family for sure. Some of these patterns can be behavioral, some of them can be inherited, and behavioral can be an inherited behavioral pattern because it's something that you've learned. In my family, a behavioral family pattern that I wasn't even aware was a pattern or a thing is in my mother's side, there are critical parents. And I never heard of a critical parent. I didn't know what that meant. When my daughter was 6 months old, I took a parenting class, and it was in that parenting class that I learned about critical parenting. Well, a few months after taking the class, I was at my grandmother's house, and she was having a little cookout, and her sisters were there. My aunt who was there, my mother, some of my cousins. And I just sat back and watched and observed the adults in the room. Well, we were in the yard, but so I sat back and watched the adults. And even my great aunts who did not have children were critical parents. I couldn't believe it. So once I became aware of it, I made a vow to change it. Isn't that kind of funny? So we can make vows that are for good intentions. They're always good intentioned. They're to protect us in a way. But I made a vow. The buck stops here. This pattern was now going to stop with me. I was not going to continue that pattern throughout my life so that it continued through my children and any generations that come before them. The really interesting thing about healing patterns and lineages is when you break a pattern and you heal that, it not only heals for yourself and it heals for future generations, but it goes backwards through your lineage and it heals the patterns of your ancestors that came before you. It's a pretty cool deal, I'll tell you. So I've been really fortunate to have some incredible healers and practitioners in my life. And one of those people is Althea Gray. She's a phenomenal healer. She's a medicine woman, curandera, and she does ancestral clearing. Work that I have done with her was so very powerful when she took me back through my mother's lineage and back through my father's lineage, and then you do soul retrieval. And I found out something really interesting, which I had no idea. Back in Portugal, I have a whole family that I was not aware of. I have these Jewish relatives, cousins and aunts and uncles that I didn't even know existed. And Althea brought that to my attention during the ancestral clearing. And I went to my Uncle Joe, who is, if anybody's going to know, it would be Uncle Joe. And sure enough, he confirmed it. And I said, Uncle Joe, how is it that we don't know this? So there can be things that you're unaware of that are in your family line that could be important and helpful for you. Over the years, I've gotten bits and pieces from different types of sessions that I have been through. One of those interesting pieces was working with Jamie and Peter Faust in Massachusetts. And they do something called family constellation. And family constellation work is really helpful in breaking damaging repetitive patterns and behaviors and emotions that limit you some way in your life that are unconscious because you have brought them in from your family system. Every family on the planet shows love or doesn't show love in a certain way. It's sort of like the law, universal law, where there's the law of relativity, the law of gravity. There's also the law of orders of love. And whatever that might look like in your family, that pattern, how your family has shown love or not shown love, most likely has repeated for many generations. And we are at a time now where I believe it is time for us to really shift these old patterns out of our families. It's time to take a deep look at them so that we can have increased love in our lives, so that you can have be released from blockages and things that are holding you back, so that you can have more positivity and positive shifts in your life. And that goes from everything from relationships to money and your finances to having more inner peace and clarity. And so when we can get to the root of things that are blocking us, then we can heal those things. And it doesn't always have to be a whole big traumatic or dramatic thing. Where family constellation work is actually really short. You don't have that many sessions typically, and it gets really to some core issues quickly, so you're not in therapy for years. Now, therapy has its benefits, and I've been to therapy multiple times in my lifetime, which has been really helpful for me. So there is a place for therapy, and it's very needed. But there are these other holistic modalities, if you will, that can get to the roots of the problems that we're not even aware are there. We know that you're not hitting your stride. Something's holding you back. You have these patterns in your family that are maybe negative, and you don't understand why that keeps repeating. So these types of work can help break through those patterns without ever having to actually talk about them. It's pretty interesting and really effective work. So until we clean up our energy field, until we clean up our homes, our energy field, our vibration, our food, our health, and the patterns of our ancestors and the lineage that has come through us, then our life often can sort of go sideways, I call it, where things seem to slide out of nowhere and it throws you off course. So taking the time and sometimes the money to utilize some of these tools that are out there will give you a return like you can't even imagine. Now, of course, I always caution to be sure that you're working with somebody who is reputable. I often look for people who my friends have used, some people that have really great recommendations and referrals, and rather than just, getting a Joe Schmo off the street. There was a time in my life, I was in my late 30s, might have even been 40, early 40s then, where I had done this solid 1 year of personal development work, working on the shadow things, working on patterns and behaviors and those types of things. And after I did the 1 year intensive, I thought, oh, thank God that's over. Well, I got into a relationship shortly after, and it wasn't long into the relationship when I realized I was starting to see some of those same patterns crop up again. And I thought, oh my God, I've already dealt with this. Why is this coming up again? Well, what I didn't know is that healing happens in layers. And so you sort of take the first layer off, and then there's another layer underneath. And when that layer is ready to heal, that comes to the surface. Well, I didn't know that back in my early days, and all I could think of was, oh my God, I can't believe I have to do more work. Now, I look forward to doing more work, even though the work can often be downright dirty and hard. But the end results are so worth it that I know I'm going to be better on the other side of whatever the uncovering is that I'm doing. So, a little bit later in the season, I have a really special guest coming on, Michael Lucier, who is the author of The Law of Attraction. And we talk about patterns, and he is going to walk you through the work that he does, which I have found in my own life to be very beneficial. So even though I do personal development work and I work with clients, I also work with people on my own stuff because I'm only as good as the work that I have done myself. So if I don't do the work, if I don't clean up the shadow, if I don't heal these family patterns and personal patterns in my life, then I wouldn't be that good of a practitioner. And so I'm always looking to improve myself in some way or other, whether it is lineage work or patterns or getting into some shadow work and figuring out why do I do this and how can I change that? Or it may be that I'm taking courses on something new. Like right now, I'm taking a really cool AI course that I am really enjoying. I have had a problem with tech. Tech has not been my friend. You may have heard me say that before. But taking this AI course from people who are really excellent in AI has made it so beneficial for me that I'm actually thrilled and can't wait till the class is ready. It's just so much fun. I'm really, really enjoying it. So try new things. Don't be afraid to dive in. And whether it's a new class to expand your mind, or it's to dive into doing some kind of personal development work, some kind of shadow work. You may want to explore becoming a yoga instructor or a healing practitioner, but you don't have to do those things to heal patterns within yourself and within your families. So the reticular activating system of the mind is always looking for what's familiar and what it knows. So if you're somebody who, for example, has addiction in your family, you can be in a room with 30 people and you're going to unconsciously pick out the addict out of the room. And you're going to think, oh my goodness, they're wonderful. Because that's what you're familiar with. So your reticular activating system of the mind is looking for what is familiar. Now, of course, when we want to shift that pattern, it's almost like we have to reprogram. We have to put a new program into our brain so that we are not looking for that particular pattern over and over again because that's what's been programmed within us. One method that I have found really helps me and I very much like is tapping or EFT, emotional freedom technique. It is super simple to learn. There's tons of YouTube videos out there. There are a couple of practitioners that I really like a lot. Dawson Church is one of them. Brad Yates is great. And Jessica and Nick Ortner are really fabulous as well in the world of EFT or tapping. Part of my mission, I feel, is to bring to you tools and processes and techniques that can help you get the blocks out of your life. Also to help you understand who you really are underneath those blocks so that you can have the life that you have always dreamed and hoped for. There is a resource page on my website where some of courses and things like that are listed there. I am going to work with the team to expand that so that you have more options because options are great. If you already are working with someone and you have had really great success, that's fabulous. Keep doing what you're doing. every step that you take into healing, into cleaning up the mess from this lifetime, because life gets messy, right? We're humans. We make choices that aren't always the best. We do things that hurt other people intentionally and unintentionally. And our ancestors have done those things to us as well. They've hurt us sometimes intentionally and sometimes not intentionally. They've carried patterns with them that they may not have been aware of and didn't have as many tools that we have today at our fingertips to be able to work with to heal these old family patterns and beliefs. Looking at astrology is another really interesting way to see what patterns might run through your family. So we have a Saturn return between 27 and 30, and then between 57 and 60. And it depends on when Saturn is transiting through your chart when you will have that exact Saturn return. If you live long enough, you may have a third Saturn return between 87, 88, and 90. So I'm going through my Saturn return right now. Saturn is going to hit my fourth house twice more before this year is out. And the fourth house is all about home and family. And my daughter just finished her first Saturn return, and Saturn transited through the fourth house of home and family. So isn't that interesting? The other thing is we share some signs in common, where my rising sign is Capricorn, her moon sign is Capricorn, my son's sun sign is Gemini. Actually, he's a triple Gemini, sun, moon, and rising sign, all in Gemini. My moon is in Gemini. So even in your astrology chart, you will often see your children, your parents, their threads will even show up in your astrology chart. Now, I love Vedic astrology. It is so intense and it can be so very accurate. If you have a really great Vedic astrologer, good for you. Now, I do have some favorite astrologers that I work with. I love Dr. Michael Lennox. I love Pam Gregory. I love Sandy Reevy. And I've worked personally with Sandy. I've worked with Deborah Silverman. So there are some fabulous astrologers out there. And I feel like astrology can be a really helpful tool for you to understand your patterns and the things that you've come in this lifetime to work through. And you will probably be surprised to find that if you do your kids' astrology charts or have your parents' astrology charts done, you will find similarities and threads of things that you have in your chart going through their charts as well. Circling back to energy and family patterns, all of these things do affect our energy and our vibration. If you come from a family like mine that had critical parents, then you're going to carry that thread, that energy through you, through your family until you break the cycle. If your family has addiction in it, that has an energy, it has a vibration to it. You're going to carry that through. And if you don't clear that, then you'll carry that through to the generations that come after you, your children, your grandchildren, and their children. Now, if you're lucky, you may have chosen, and yes, I did say chosen, a family that has really incredible qualities to it, even if there are difficult qualities as well. A really great quality that I appreciate that runs through my family on my dad's side is education and always learning new things. Now, education doesn't mean that you have to go to college, you have to go get your master's degree or your doctorate. Although that's wonderful to do that if that is meant for you in this lifetime. But education can be educating yourself about the environment, about nature. It can be educating yourself about health, about wellness, about energy medicine. Education is so broad. And so when you are learning and expanding, that has an energy vibration to it. And for me, anytime that I'm learning, I'm happy. I love to learn. And I get that from my dad's side of the family. So, what are the positive traits that run through your family? And then, what are the traits that energy isn't so great around? Sit down and take some time with this. Really dive into it and see what patterns are there. What patterns would you like to keep and expand? And what patterns would you like to heal and release from yourself to help yourself and to help your family in future generations and the family that's come before you? I really encourage you to do some work around this and do some really thought processing. Talk to your ancestors if you have them that you can talk to. Ask questions and really get to understand some of the things that maybe you weren't aware of. And then you can go from there once you know, and even if you don't know, if things are coming out sideways in your life, then you can be sure that there is some block there that could be related to your family, whether it's your family of origin or your family of upbringing. So that's going to be a wrap for the show for today. I hope that you've gotten value out of this. And the next show, we are going to get into ego. I think you're going to be surprised about what my take is on the ego. So stay tuned for that. And thank you so much for listening, for taking time out of your life and your busy day to listen to Boldly Authentic. I love and appreciate you so very much. And I would really love and appreciate if you share this with your friends. Appreciate if you could leave me a great review. Thanks again so much for being here, for hanging out with me. I will see you soon somewhere in the universe. Ciao for now. Big love to you.
This podcast was produced by Alchemy of the Earth Inc. at cynthiafontaine.com. Producer Elise Spizak. Media Relations LJ Rank. Director Ryan Fontaine. And sound engineer David Breton. Please subscribe to patreon.com/boldlyauthentic for exclusive membership bonuses.